Just yesterday, 2021's Global Game Jam wrapped up. This year's theme was Lost and Found, so I submitted a short narrative game about a little brazier whose flame goes out, and he must find his light once more. If you want to try it for yourself, it's called The Little Brazier, and you can play it in your browser on itch.io via the link in the description. I wanted to put together a post-mortem on the project, which I'll break up into a couple of key categories: Game Jam advice, my writing process, and the making of The Little Brazier, in which I'll go over some technical details about how I was able to finish the project in just 15 hours. To make a game in such a short amount of time, anyone will tell you that your best friends are scope planning and time management. So what is scope? To boil it down, it's how much content you're going to put in your game. It's also a matter of time management. You need to be realistic about what you're going to be able to accomplish in a given time period. I think it's useful to link these two skills together. You need to evaluate how much content you're going to put in your game within the time you have. The way I improved my time management skill was to measure the heck out of everything that I do. That's why I know this project took me exactly 15 hours from start to finish. I've been measuring my time for years. Basically, I use a stopwatch to track my time as I perform a task, then I tally it in a spreadsheet. Recently, I've also begun trying to guess how long a set of tasks is going to take me to complete, then comparing my guess with the actual time taken, trying not to over or underestimate. But yeah, there are plenty of tactics out there that you can use to get better at time management. That's just what I do. Now, as for scope, planning out your project is going to be important whether you're hacking together a jam project over the weekend, or working on a project that is going to take years to develop. And honestly, the best way to get better at scope planning is to just get experience making games. You'll naturally start to get a feel for what is a quote-unquote hard feature to develop, and what your strengths and weaknesses are as a developer. To tie in what I said before about estimating how long something is going to take, if you're sure you know how to do something, you can give yourself an actual estimate in minutes or hours. I typically round things into quarter-hour increments when estimating. If you're going to tackle something that you don't know how to do well, it could take an entire day just to figure it out. So if you're aiming to finish a jam project, personally I don't recommend including features that you don't yet know how to make. Maybe you want to push yourself to learn a new skill, and that's fine. But I would still recommend learning that skill ahead of the game jam and then using the game jam as a chance to apply it. That way you're dealing with less of an unknown. For my part, this was my 8th game jam that I've participated in, and I've been making games for over 17 years. So I've got a pretty good handle on what I can and can't do and how long it's going to take. The Little Brazier is quite short, lasting only about 5 minutes depending on how quickly you read the text. So I started with a document with 2 headers, to do and stretch goals. Maybe you want to do this in Trello? I just used a simple text document. I started by filling out the basics I knew had to be in the game, like the main character, some of the NPCs they would interact with, artwork and programming for those characters, etc. I also came up with some features that would be nice to have if there was time, and those went into the stretch goal category. As I was working on the game, I made a couple passes at this list, moving more and more over to stretch goals. Because, yeah, when you're in the middle of the project and you can see how long things are taking you, you'll realize what you're not going to have time for anymore. Also, sometimes I got bitten by a bug of inspiration and added things which weren't on the list at all. So what I'm trying to say is, this list will help, but it isn't the be-all and end-all of your development process. You aren't going to succeed for sure because you stuck to the list, and you won't fail if you deviate from this list either. And naturally, this only worked because I was working by myself on the project. I'd have to make a completely separate video about the recommendations I would have for working on a game jam as part of a team. Alright, next up, writing process. I'm still quite new to writing for games, and that was one of my main motivations behind making this game, to get better at writing dialogue for games. I started brainstorming the day the jam theme was announced, while on a walk with my partner. With the jam's theme being Lost and Found, I wanted to tell a story that took a more metaphorical approach. I actually came up with the idea for the Little Brazier pretty early on in the conversation, but I forced myself to come up with a few more ideas. Basically, I figured if the idea was really as good as I thought it was, it would keep popping up in my head, and it did. It wasn't the very first idea I came up with, and later ideas in our discussion informed some of the themes in the story. It wasn't until a little bit later the same day, where I was inspired to base elements in the story off of a short story by Lord Dunsany from A Dreamer's Tales. And it wasn't until the next day where I came up with enough NPCs to interact with to consider the idea worth writing in its entirety. Incidentally, as part of scope management, I ended up cutting all but 3 of these characters, but it was vital for me to start with the full list, because that dictated which direction the story was going to go, and I could cut the ones that weren't essential to the story. I also decided around this time that I would write the story so that it would be friendly for all ages. Ideally, something that kids could enjoy if they took it literally, and that an adult would appreciate it if they took it on a different level. So yeah, 2 days, 1 hour of brainstorming each, and about another hour of actually writing before I decided which characters I would keep and which ones I would cut. Overall, I spent about 4 hours writing on the project, and the remaining time was spent on artwork and development. The first thing I actually did to make the game was take stock of what assets I had available. The menus and dialogue system were ripped wholesale out of a past Jam project, with a few tweaks made along the way. About half of the environment artwork is pulled from assets I used in past games, including the Tileset, which is part of an RPG Tileset that I published for sale on itch.io, link in the description. And for the music, I reached out to Mark Sparling, who has provided the music for nearly all of my past Jam projects, and he gave me permission to use a track from his daily songs. The biggest feature I developed, unique to this game, was the lighting system, which was actually a pretty fun hack. I wanted a simple, cartoonish approach to lighting, so I wanted the light to catch on highlights in the tiles. To achieve this effect, I grabbed the highlight color off the tile set and made it completely transparent. Then, I made the background color of the level set to the highlight color that I took out of the tile set. And finally, I inserted the light as a layer that went above the background but below the tile set. Lastly, I added another layer at half the size that went just above the tiles, and added a squash and stretch effect to both layers to give the light an organic look. And that was how I made the little Brazier. I hope that you found something useful in this postmortem, and it would mean a lot to me if you tried out the game, or perhaps recommended it to a parent to play along with their child. So until next time, best of luck with your creative endeavors.